I am 21 years old, and my name is Angela. I had an Instagram account with 1,100 followers. I loved sharing pictures of my adventures and connecting with people from all over the world. My profile was set to public, allowing anyone to visit my page, like my pictures, and leave comments. Most of the time, it was fun to receive attention from strangers who enjoyed my photos. But one person stood out from the rest and turned my excitement into fear. It all started with a beach picture featuring me and my friend. We were having a great time, wearing swimsuits and enjoying the sunny day. As usual, I received several comments, but one caught my eye. It was from a person I didn't know, a man who had a mysterious profile. He had only 3 pictures, 80 followers, and was following over 200 people, including me. All of his photos were selfies, which seemed odd for someone who appeared to be in his 40s or 50s. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it was normal to have unknown people interacting with my posts. However, the man's comments became more frequent. He started commenting on every new photo I posted. Some comments were harmless, like hot, but others were creepier. 2 days later, instead of leaving a comment, he sent me a direct message. It said, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you that you're beautiful, even though I'm like 35 years older than you. LOL." I was taken aback by his message, but I replied with a simple, "LOL, thanks." I hoped he wouldn't say anything else, but he responded, "Maybe one day, I'll meet you. LOL." This made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and I decided not to respond. Everything about this man seemed creepy, but I didn't block him because I didn't want to lose the free following and likes he provided. However, things took a dark turn when I posted a new photo of my sister Carol and me in front of our house. This innocent picture prompted another comment from the man saying, "You and your sister are so cute." I couldn't handle it anymore. I removed the comment and immediately blocked him, hoping to put an end to his unsettling behavior. Later that day, Carol and I found ourselves home alone. I was in the bathroom, painting my nails, getting ready to go out, when I noticed a car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of our house. The front of the car was visible, but the rest was hidden behind a bush that separated our front yard from the neighbors. The car's headlights turned off, and I couldn't see anyone stepping out. This struck me as odd, because we lived on a dead-end street with no through traffic. Feeling exposed, I quickly closed the blinds. As it was time for me to leave, I didn't bother saying goodbye to Carol, assuming we would text each other as we usually did. I walked to my car, glancing at the mysterious car still parked outside. It was a Maxima with tinted windows, making it impossible to see inside. I got in my car, did a 3-point turn, and drove down the street to the nearest main road. I attended a social gathering at a friend's house. It wasn't a wild party, but we enjoyed some drinks. Aware that I had to drive, I cut myself off early. Nevertheless, I must admit that I was a bit tipsy when I started my 5-minute drive back home. As I arrived, I immediately noticed the Maxima still parked in front of my house. I couldn't help but wonder who the owner was. Curiosity getting the better of me, I drove past the car slowly, trying to see inside, but the tinted windows and darkness made it impossible. I parked my car and sent a few text messages to friends, letting them know I had arrived safely. While standing outside, I took one last look at the Maxima before entering my house. It was past midnight, but Carol was usually awake at this time. Surprisingly, her bedroom door was wide open, yet the lights were off. I assumed she had gone out for once. As I walked towards the front door, I dropped my keys. For some reason, fear paralyzed me, and I hesitated to bend down and pick them up. Instead, I rang the doorbell repeatedly, hoping Carol would answer quickly. But to my surprise, she didn't respond. Reluctantly, I got on my knees and found the keys right on the doormat. I opened the door and entered swiftly, stealing one last glance at the Maxima before shutting the door behind me. Feeling relieved to be home, I walked upstairs, down the hall towards Carol's room. However, something felt off. Her door was wide open, and I could hear faint whispers coming from inside. My heart skipped a beat, and I approached cautiously. Peering through the crack, I saw Carol's teary eyes peeping out from the closet. She gestured for me to stay quiet, putting her finger on her lips. I quickly knelt down and opened the closet door wider, silently asking her what was going on. She didn't utter a word, just continued to signal me to be quiet. I gently tugged at her arm, pulled her out of the closet, and closed it quietly. Once she was out, we locked eyes, both filled with fear and confusion. But our attention quickly shifted to the center of her room, where we saw a man standing, partially obscured by darkness. We didn't know if he was facing us, but it didn't matter. We both screamed and ran as fast as we could. The man chased us relentlessly, and we dashed toward my car. With trembling hands, I managed to lock the doors just in time, seconds before the man reached us. He began violently pounding on the window with his shoulder while my sister screamed and wailed in terror, intensifying the situation. Through the chaos, I realized that this was the same man who had been stalking me on Instagram. The realization sent shivers down my spine. Desperate for help, I continuously honked the horn, hoping to attract attention from the neighbors. Miraculously, it seemed to work. The man abruptly stopped and ran back to his car, the Maxima. He swiftly performed a 3-point turn and sped away down another street, disappearing into the night. Shaken and terrified, we turned around and hurried back into the house. I immediately called our parents, explaining what had just happened, and then contacted the police. They arrived promptly and investigated how the man had broken into our house. It turned out that he had climbed up a ladder onto the awning and accessed the window on the upper floor. I informed the police about the man stalking me on Instagram, suspecting that he had somehow found my address when I posted the photo with my sister, which inadvertently displayed our house number. To assist in the investigation, I wanted to provide the police with the man's Instagram account. However, when I checked my blocked accounts, it was empty. The man had already deleted his Instagram profile. Even if there was a way for Instagram to track deleted users, it was futile since I couldn't remember his username. It was a frustrating realization, and I knew that the police's options were limited. Since that horrifying incident, I have learned my lesson. I changed my Instagram settings to private, only accepting follow requests from people I know personally. I've become more cautious and paranoid, especially when it comes to sharing revealing photos or personal information online. In my second year of college, I had a dorm room all to myself. It was a special room tucked away in a quiet corner of the floor, separated from the rest of the rooms in its own little section. To even see the door, you had to turn a corner, which made it feel secluded and private. This was great because I could hang out with friends on my floor, invite people over, and still have peace and quiet when I needed to study or sleep. During the first few weeks of the semester, while I was studying for a biology exam, something strange happened. As I sat in silence, I heard a faint tapping noise on my door. It was so soft that I almost didn't notice it at first. I called out, "Come in!" But the door remained closed. Curious, I got up to open it, thinking it was one of my friends playing a prank on me. However, when I swung the door open, there was no one there. I walked around the corner to look down the hall, hoping to catch a glimpse of the prankster, but there was nobody in sight. It was clear that someone was messing with me, but I couldn't figure out who. Shaking off the incident, I returned to my bed and resumed studying, this time leaving the door open. Surprisingly, nobody came back to continue the prank. The following night, just as I was about to drift off to sleep after turning off my bedroom lamp, the tapping sound returned. This time it was much louder, more like a knocking. I called out, "Who is it?" But there was no response. Feeling a mixture of curiosity and annoyance, I quickly got out of bed and opened the door, hoping to catch the prankster in the act. But once again, the hallway was empty. Determined to solve the mystery, I sprinted down the tiny corridor that led to my room, only to see the back of someone disappearing around the far corner on the opposite side of the hallway. Without hesitation, I raced down the hallway, turning the corner where I had seen the person just moments before. To my surprise, there was a door at the end of the hallway, but it wasn't a dorm room, it was a bathroom. Feeling brave and determined, I pushed the bathroom door open forcefully. The light was off, casting an eerie atmosphere. I flicked the light switch, half expecting to find someone hiding inside, but there was no one to be seen. Confused and a little unnerved, I decided to check the 2 bathroom stalls. Both of them were shut, and as I knelt down and peered under the doors, I caught sight of 2 heavy black boots. My heart raced as I mustered the courage to push one of the stall doors open, but to my surprise, there were the boots, sitting on the floor, without a person to wear them, and then, out of nowhere, I heard a creepy giggling noise. It wasn't a normal giggle. It was the kind of laugh that only an old crazy man could produce. All the confidence I had built up vanished in an instant, and fear gripped me. I turned and sprinted back to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. Trembling, I jumped back into bed and frantically texted every friend I had, seeking comfort and answers. Unfortunately, everyone was fast asleep and unaware of my distress. The knocking returned one more time that night, but this time I ignored it. It persisted for about 30 seconds before the mysterious person finally gave up. The next day, I spoke to everyone on my floor, desperate for answers, but nobody else had heard any knocking, and they all swore they weren't playing a prank on me. Their sincerity was evident, leaving me puzzled and unsettled. I couldn't understand why this person had chosen to harass me or who they were. Based on the boots I saw and the chilling laughter I heard, it seemed like an older man was behind it all. The thought of that disturbed me deeply. I lived on the beautiful east coast of the United States. Recently, my family and I moved from Georgia to Florida, where we bought a lovely new waterfront house. As we settled into our new home, I realized that it would take a couple of days to sell my boat in Georgia and bring it down to our new place. However, there was a little problem. I didn't have a car with a tow hitch or a trailer to transport the boat, so I decided that sailing it would be the best option. While my wife stayed behind to finish moving the rest of our belongings to the new house, I kissed my family goodbye and embarked on this solo adventure. They weren't really willing to join me on this journey, and I couldn't blame them. Nevertheless, I prepared enough food and supplies to sustain me throughout the trip. The first day of sailing was a breeze. I got some sleep and sailed for about 10 hours the next day, taking breaks in between, of course. By nightfall, I found myself feeling quite exhausted. Sleeping in a rocking boat wasn't the easiest thing to do. I spent hours tossing and turning, trying to find a comfortable position. I pressed my head firmly against the pillow, hoping to mitigate the incessant rocking motion of the boat. But as I lay there, I began to hear faint sounds coming from above me. The best way to describe them would be as small thumps, like someone walking on my boat. Naturally, being in the middle of the ocean, it wasn't unusual to hear random sounds like creaks and thumps caused by the boat's movement. However, these thumps were different. They were rapid and consistent, making me feel uneasy. The thought that someone could be out there, so far away from land, sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to go outside and investigate. I decided to be as quiet as possible, so I opened the cabin door slowly, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing the sounds. But before I could fully open the door, I heard a loud splash in the water. It was as if someone or something had jumped into the ocean. Fear coursed through my veins as I realized that I wasn't alone out there. Without wasting another moment, I rushed to the cockpit and started the boat's engine. I wanted to put some distance between myself and whatever or whoever might be lurking in the water. As I sailed away, I felt a slight bump as my boat collided with something in the water. It wasn't a heavy impact, but it was enough for me to notice. However, I couldn't see what it was because I wasn't paying attention, and the lights weren't on either. I sailed for a few more hours in the deep, dark night. Even though I was wide awake, the exhaustion began to take its toll. I decided to kill the motor and go back to bed, hoping that sleep would come easily this time. But oh boy, was I wrong. Despite my weariness, I found myself having trouble falling asleep once again. About half an hour passed, and that's when the thumps returned. This time they seemed louder and clearer, sending my heart racing once more. The thumps were deliberate and consistent, completely unlike any boat noises I had heard before. It felt as if I was being followed by someone. I couldn't just stay hidden in the cabin all night, so I mustered up the courage to go outside once more. As I peered around, trying to locate the source of the sounds, I realized that there was no one on the boat. The entire vessel seemed deserted. Could it all have been my imagination? Were these sounds merely coming from the boat itself? Convinced that was the case, I returned to the cabin and attempted to go back to sleep. But as I lay there in silence, straining my ears to catch any faint noise, I heard something that sent chills down my spine. It wasn't the sound of the wind outside or the water hitting the boat. It was the sound of someone breathing. The breaths were distinct, separate from my own. They were coming from inside the cabin. Panic surged within me, but I knew I had to maintain my composure. I cautiously exited the bed, walked outside the cabin, and locked myself in the safety of the cockpit. My plan was clear: to sail until I found a dock by the shore. I had already called the police 15 minutes earlier, requesting that a few officers be waiting at the dock where I intended to moor the boat. It was still dark out, but as I approached the dock, I noticed people standing there. Relief washed over me. I couldn't have been more excited to reach safety. When I brought the boat next to the dock and stepped out from the cockpit, I began screaming for help, desperately pointing towards the cabin door. Two officers, their hands resting on their holstered pistols, quickly rushed inside the cabin. Within seconds, their voices echoed with urgency as they yelled at someone. They emerged with a man in custody, a disheveled figure with long wet gray hair and a scraggly beard. He wore ripped skinny jeans and a gray t-shirt, all of them soaked. His appearance was akin to that of a person under the influence of drugs. The police questioned him, hoping to uncover how and when he had boarded my boat and what his intentions were. But the man remained silent, refusing to answer any of their inquiries. Looking back on the events, I realized that when I heard the breathing in my cabin, he must have been hiding beneath my bed. The thought alone was horrifying beyond measure. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I returned to my cabin and finally managed to fall into a deep sleep. By late morning, I arrived at our new house, bringing an end to my nightmarish adventure on the open sea. I was driving all alone through the vast desert on a shortcut from a place called Sunbeam Valley to the city of sparkling sands. It was a scorching afternoon, and the road stretched ahead of me, surrounded by nothing but sand and cacti. As I continued on the two-lane road, I reached a place called Sandy Hollow, a desolate town that seemed abandoned and forgotten. The road ahead led me through a mountain range that lay between Sandy Hollow and the bustling city of sparkling sands. Driving up into the mountains, a sense of isolation engulfed me. The canyon I was now driving through had tall grass on both sides, swaying gently in the breeze. Suddenly, something caught my eye. Up ahead, in the middle of the road, there were objects scattered about. Curiosity mingled with caution, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I slowed down my car, inching closer to the peculiar sight. There, right in front of me, was a red car, a Pontiac Fiero, blocking both lanes of the road. Its doors were wide open, and clothes were strewn all over the place. But that wasn't the strangest part. Two bodies lay face down on the road, a man and a woman. Fear gripped me tightly, and my instincts told me something was terribly wrong. Being a Marine, I had been trained to stay alert in dangerous situations. I reached under the seat and pulled out my trusty 9mm pistol, ready to defend myself if needed. The scene before me felt too perfect, too meticulously arranged. It felt like an ambush, like a trap set for unsuspecting travelers like me. As I carefully scanned the road, my eyes widened in disbelief. I noticed a narrow line, just enough for my car to squeeze past the man on the left side of the road and the woman behind the Fiero. It seemed like my only chance to escape this eerie situation. Without wasting another moment, I made up my mind. I shifted my car into first gear and pressed the gas pedal down with all my might. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I maneuvered my car along the planned line. Miraculously, I managed to pass by the back of the Fiero without hitting it, or the lifeless bodies on the road. My heart pounded in my chest as I sped away, leaving the haunting scene behind. I drove forward, my foot still heavy on the gas pedal, until I had to slow down after reaching 100 meters. Only then did I allow myself to catch my breath and let my heart rate settle. Out of curiosity, I looked in my rearview mirror, and what I saw was so shocking that my eyes widened with terror. The two bodies that I had seen before had somehow risen to their knees, and a swarm of people emerged from the tall grass on both sides of the road, surrounding the car and the bodies. In that moment, a surge of gratitude washed over me for the split-second decision I had made. I would never know what would have happened if I had stepped out of the car to check on the bodies, or if I had stopped my car closer to them. The thought sent shivers down my spine once again. When I was just 16 years old, I lived with my mom in a tiny apartment in the bustling borough of Bronx, New York. Let me tell you, living in the Bronx was an experience, but not a good one. There were always sketchy characters lurking around, and it was scary to walk alone at night. Our apartment was on the 7th floor, the second to last one in the hallway. You see, our neighbor, the owner of the last apartment in the hall, was a very strange man. We never even knew his name, but he had a distinctive appearance. He was an elderly African-American man in his 60s, with very little hair left, and what remained was gray. Every time I entered the apartment, he would be sitting outside his door on the windowsill, staring at me with an emotionless expression. My mom warned me to stay away from him, as he gave her an eerie feeling. One day, something changed. As usual, I arrived home around 9 p.m., and there he was, sitting on the windowsill. But instead of just looking at me, he said, "Hi, Alyssa." That's my name, and it made my skin crawl. I couldn't understand how he knew my name, but I didn't have the courage to ask. Ignoring his strange greeting, I hurried inside, shutting the door behind me, eager to escape his creepy presence. Being alone that night since my mom was working the night shift, I tried to go about my usual routine. I washed up a little bit, had a snack, and started doing laundry. But as I stepped into the shower, I heard a strange grumbling noise that sent shivers down my spine. It was a concerning noise, and I couldn't figure out what could be causing it. Worried that someone might be in the apartment, I quickly finished my shower. As I stepped out of the bathroom, I heard a similar noise, this time coming from my bedroom. Curiosity mingled with fear, and I followed the sound, desperately searching for its source. That's when I noticed a tiny hole in the wall, almost unnoticeable at first. My curiosity got the best of me, and I moved closer to examine it. To my horror, I realized that the hole connected our apartment to the neighbor's apartment. Someone had been spying on me through that hole. My heart raced as I crouched down, peering through the tiny opening. I couldn't believe my eyes. A man's eye was staring back at me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The grumbling noise from the bathroom suddenly made sense. It was the sound of someone invading my privacy. Overwhelmed with fear, I stumbled backward in shock. Frantically, I rushed back to the bathroom and felt along the walls until I found another hole, identical to the one in my room. It was clear now. My creepy neighbor had drilled these holes to spy on me. Panic consumed me, and I immediately called my mom, explaining everything to her while she tried to calm me down. She urged me to call the police, and she rushed home as quickly as she could. The Bronx Police Department deserves credit for their rapid response. In less than 5 minutes, there were uniformed officers standing outside our apartment door. My mom arrived half an hour later, worried sick about what had transpired. With her support, I pressed charges against the neighbor for stalking, invasion of privacy, and criminal mischief. The apartment building took the matter seriously too. They promptly evicted the man and, at his expense, patched up the holes that had violated my privacy. The sense of relief that washed over me was indescribable. Finally, I could feel safe and secure in my own home once again. Not so long ago, my good friend Pete, who carried the adventurous spirit of a scout in his heart, invited me to tag along on a camping expedition. He had an aura of a genuine nature enthusiast and had a knack for losing himself in the wilderness. Pete's girlfriend, Lily, was also part of this outing. They were both equally thrilled about this adventure, and their excitement was contagious. So we packed our camping gear, climbed into Pete's old rickety car, and embarked on our journey into the unknown. Pete was a firm believer that real camping wasn't about crowded campsites buzzing with people. No. He advocated the allure of solitude, the kind of camping that took you to the heart of nature, devoid of human influence. Guided by this belief, he drove us down a barely used path, leading to a quiet, secluded part of the forest that seemed untouched by time. It was a little eerie, with towering trees casting long, forlorn shadows, their leaves rustling like whispered secrets. We began unpacking our camping equipment: tents, sleeping bags, food supplies, first aid kits, and of course, the essential rolls of toilet paper. Pete, always the diligent planner, had packed more than he usually would to ensure Lily and I were comfortable during our first foray into the wilderness. He was an efficient commander, distributing tasks to ensure a swift setup of our campsite. I was handed the responsibility of pitching the tents. As I worked on the tents, Lily assisted me intermittently, unpacking supplies and settling them within easy reach. In the meantime, Pete had already embarked on his mission to gather dry firewood, returning sporadically with logs and twigs to build our fire for the night. The forest seemed to sink into an enchanting twilight quicker than we'd expected. But we were prepared, with the fire crackling merrily, illuminating our faces with a warm orange glow, and the tents standing like proud soldiers. We huddled around the fire. We found ourselves reminiscing about old times, sharing anecdotes and hearty laughs. Lily, growing weary of our boisterous tales, decided to turn in, leaving Pete and me to enjoy the warmth of the fire and the quiet whispers of the night. Pete suddenly raised his hand, signaling for me to quiet down. He had heard something strange echoing from the deep recesses of the forest. The sound was faint but unusual, a peculiar rustle that was neither the wind nor a small creature scurrying about. As the sound grew louder and nearer, I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. Then an eerie clicking and growling sound pierced through the quiet forest, chilling me to the bone. It was an alien sound, not like any animal or bird I'd ever heard. I turned to Pete, barely whispering my fear that it could be a wolf. But instead of answering, Pete gestured urgently for me to retreat into the safety of the tent. I followed his instructions, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside the tent, the eerie sounds seemed even louder, a terrifying serenade from the dark forest. And then I saw it. A shadow, monstrous and grotesque, projected on the thin fabric of the tent. I stifled a scream, my blood running cold. The shadow was of a hulking creature, bipedal and lumbering, slowly moving past my tent and making its way towards Pete and Lily's tent. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shattered the night. It was Lily. Immediately, Pete's voice echoed through the forest, his urgent shouts telling us to run. I burst out of my tent and followed them, plunging headfirst into the dark woods. I could hear the thunderous footfalls of the creature close behind us. The realization hit me like a punch. It was chasing us. Through a combination of fear and sheer adrenaline, Pete led us unerringly back to the car. We scrambled in, slamming the doors shut behind us. However, the ordeal was far from over. We were trapped in a dead end, and Pete had to execute a painstakingly slow three-point turn in pitch-black darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched him skillfully maneuver the car, narrowly missing the surrounding trees. Finally, we were heading away from the nightmarish forest, leaving behind our camping gear and an adventure that was supposed to be fun. As we sped away, Lily recounted her horrifying experience. She had heard the creature's heavy breaths and felt something massive pushing against their tent. Even now, we have no idea what the creature was. All we know is that it was enormous, made terrifying sounds, and walked on two legs.